the House of Commons could be his Achilles heel. I say could be, because he did some terrific performances in the House of Commons, but you never knew with Neil. He could be terrific, or he could be rambling, or he could be terrible, or he could be workmanlike. With John Smith, for example, or with Roy Hattersley, you always knew there would be a certain minimum level of competence. Neil could rise to enormous heights, but I'm afraid he could fall to pretty low depths as well.
Increasingly, Kinnock relied on an inner circle of advisers, including Peter Mandelson, the party's Director of Communications. They were deployed to put the best gloss on the policy review and to limit the damage done by those who disagreed with it.
At that time, under the Neil leadership, people around him misused the media and their contacts with the media to do over and attack and undermine senior figures in the party who they were displeased with in some way. It was done to Michael Meacher, it was done to Brian Gould even, who'd been the golden boy of the 1987 election. It was done to John Prescott a number of times. I always thought it was disgraceful behaviour. I mean, here was a leadership that was claiming to want to reunite the party, using the media to attack senior levels of its own organisation.
When John Prescott defied the leadership and stood for deputy in 1988, some felt that Mandelson and others went too far when they briefed the press.
Well, I think to these advisers, there's a feeling, well, the leader feels, who'll rid me of this troublesome priest? And they play their part, and there's no doubt we felt very strongly about that. They weren't only whispering, they were pretty well shouting what they thought had to be a rubbishing of me. I was challenging the leadership concept, albeit that I was only running for the deputy leadership. They feared that I might do a lot better than I did. Certainly there was threats about whether people would stay in the job if I was elected, and all sorts of accusations made. But that's the nature of the political game. Most of them were private, which, as you know, they never put their names to them, but you live with that in this game.
A series of articles appeared giving vent to Kinnock's fury and contempt. But Prescott and his friends could only speculate about who was behind these off-the-record briefings.
Well, I suspect two of the leading ones were Patricia Hewitt herself, Neil's press secretary, and certainly Peter Mandelson, who had a rather personality clash with John Prescott. John distrusted them because he felt that they were briefing journalists against him, and because he felt that they were the sort of people who were going behind the scenes saying, well, you know, shame about Prescott, rugged, down to earth, doesn't have a great deal upstairs, would be absolutely disastrous in a top position in the Labour Party. I think his suspicions were probably fairly well founded, although, as the event showed, it didn't make any difference long term.
I haven't heard anyone say this either to my face or behind my back. It doesn't fit in with my own recollection of events. The matters were dealt with between Neil Kinnock and John Prescott, and they're not things that I could comment on at this stage.
Brendan, what's his name? Bruce. Brendan Bruce.
Peter Mandelson became renowned for his skill in handling the media. Journalists relied on his briefings for good stories.
No, hold on a minute. Take that off. Hold on. Take that off.
His teasing, tongue-in-cheek style was used allegedly to brutal effect against senior party figures. In some sections of the party, his methods aroused deep concern and hostility.
I'm not going to comment on the drinking. Not commenting at all.
There's no doubt that he did have that influence, and he's able to see ahead how the press might react to things. And I think when you get very much caught up with the press and the media, people like Peter become extremely important as advisors in those areas. And I thought he had extraordinary influence beyond what he should have exercised, but I'm sure Peter would feel he was carrying out the job that he was expected to do. It's in that grey area of what you're doing for whom and who agrees it that we get these disagreements and the feelings of jealousy and the accusations of mythical power.
I know one or two members of the Shadow Cabinet got themselves in a bit of a twist about it all. I never had much patience for that, frankly. You see, I think they all knew that I would never appoint a hitman. If there was anything to be done, I'd do it myself.
And if you went to Neil and protested, as often Shadow Cabinet members did, because I wasn't the only targeted in that, Neil used to deny they were going on, and it wasn't his office. Well, we just all knew, frankly, that wasn't true. And whether he knew or not is another matter, but certainly his office were at it, and I don't think it was limited to Peter Mandelson.
In 1989, Michael Meacher, the Shadow Employment Secretary, was interviewed about trade union reform. This was a sensitive and unfinished area of the policy review, not yet agreed. To the leader's fury, Meacher suggested on the programme that Labour might restore the right to secondary picketing.
And secondary pickets.
In the following day's press, journalists quoted unnamed sources in the Labour Party who rubbished Meacher and hinted at his demotion.
Press briefings were given from Walworth Road by Peter Mandelson. I was one of those who were the victims of these briefings, which were designed to undermine and erode our position. A number of my shadow cabinet colleagues, whom I could name, were also part of that exercise.
Nobody was undermining anyone. What often the press office was doing was saving politicians from themselves, from their own gaffes and from the messes that they had created. And when somebody goes on television and does something which creates sort of palpable damage to the party and the message we're trying to get across, it has to be put right. It's all hands to the pump. I mean, people have to get on the phone and ring up so-and-so and say, well, he didn't mean to say this, and it's not quite like that, and well, actually, this is consistent with that, but, you know, we are moving toward... You know, it's complicated, it's difficult, it's damage limitation, it's elastoplast, it happens all the time. And the poor guy in the middle, you know, doesn't have an easy ride. He tends to get kicked by both sides, usually, and it was often the case.
No.
Michael Meacher, a left-winger, was duly replaced by Tony Blair as employment spokesman.
Sorry, it's previously done. Well, it's just on the government's...
OK, well, look, no, hang on. If we're going to do this properly, let us do it properly.
OK.
If you want...
Blair was always a moderniser, dedicated to the complete overhaul of the Labour Party.
I mean, I've never had any doubt as to what the Labour Party has to do in order to become a viable left-of-centre party of government again. I've never had any doubt about that. I mean, I know it sounds arrogant to say it, but to me, the values and principles of the Labour Party are what brought me into the Labour Party. You know, the belief in a strong and decent, cohesive society is necessary for the betterment of the individual. The belief in social justice, the need to combat the social and economic evils around us. But the means of achieving those have got to be different in today's world.
The government's intervention on the rail dispute has obviously raised it into a major political story.
Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson were extremely close.
Do you want to make a call, Tony?
Well, I'll do that.
Whether you're prepared to, endorse the rail...
It was said that Blair relied on Mandelson's advice, turning to him for guidance on his political advancement.
The advice I would have given to Tony Blair at the time was, first of all, to work out very clearly where you were going and what your end destination was going to be, and then to establish in your mind and with your colleagues a very clear route map as to how you were going to arrive there, and then get on with it, quietly, behind the scenes.
Many colleagues became convinced that Peter Mandelson had his own plan for the Labour Party, and that he was doing his utmost to ensure the advancement of a new generation of like-minded politicians.
I think John Prescott summed it up rather well. He called the group of people who were being promoted the beautiful people. By that, he was talking about a group of people like Tony Blair, Gordon Brown. And I think, in a sense, to understand that, you have to understand the politics of the Labour Party. And Peter Mandelson is on the far right of the Labour Party. And he was, in a sense, a player in the game. He wasn't a neutral servant of the party, didn't claim to be, didn't want to be. He wanted to be a player in the game. And so, therefore, he tended to promote those people whose views he felt were in line with his own.
I think that there was some interest in the question of who might, in due course, succeed Neil. And it was in Neil's interest, and in the interest of some others, that the successor should come from a younger group. It was therefore important that, it was hoped, I think, that Neil would hold on for long enough to see off someone like John Smith. Neil would win the election or would stay there for long enough so that John's time would have gone. It was also clear at that point that Gordon Brown and Tony Blair were being ushered forward.
I don't think anybody should forget that, in fact, both of these men were Neil Kinnock protégés. and both of them benefited, I think, from his support.